sheet. Right, are we there? Right. Welcome. We've had a little bit of difficulty one way or another in getting things out. So while we're a bit slim in the room, we have actually got a number of people with us online, something in the 20s at least at the moment. So that's rather pleasing. Philip, if you could do the housekeeping bit.
Yes, usual housekeeping things. The ladies and gents toilets things just outside there. We're not expecting any kind of crisis or anything, but should there be some incident, then first happens is the lady's voice should come on telling us that something is up. If we actually have to do anything about it, the gentleman should come on telling us to evacuate, in which case you go out basically the way in, unless that is impossible, in which case there's a top corner. If you need to leave before the end, you may have to just press the green release button on the doors. Okay.
I think it's a select enough audience that don't need to be introduced.
Yeah, as Jim is giving the lecture, I will introduce him. He has stepped in at relatively short notice. He was going to give us a talk anyway this season, but due to us having to juggle the programme, he's stepped in at relatively short notice to give this one. He's going to talk to us about assaying and hallmarking of gold and silver. He gave us an earlier version of this back in February 2022 as an emergency fill-in when the then booked speaker went down with COVID on the morning of that they were due to come and give us a lecture. So some of us may have had a version of it, but I think he's polished it up a little bit since then.
It's been expanded since then.
Added quite a lot to it. So I think you know, assaying, I suppose it really goes back to what his name, the Greek chap that jumped out of his bath and ran stark naked down the road, having worked out how to work out the density of things. Of course, that was in nice Greek warm sunshine. We wouldn't happening here.
Yes.
But so whether Jim is going to start back in ancient Greece, I don't know. But he's going to tell us about the more modern versions of saying.
Okay. It's some 50 years since I was appointed a keeper at Birmingham Museums of Science and Industry in Newhall Street. I was asked to take over dealing with opinions and visitors' inquiries about anything covered by the museum's wide remit. Oh, jolly. Museums don't give valuations, thank goodness. That's because the staff are just not in touch with the market. But of course, there's all sorts of other information that people think the museum will provide, and we try and provide that service. With a background in engineering and vehicle legislation and industrial pollution, I then needed to find some shortcuts to gaining expertise, and I grasped any system of coding for information with both hands, patents and registered design marks and so on. The oldest form of computer protection, consumer protection, in the UK was established by statute in 1238. It was for the testing and marking of precious metal objects. By 1363, it was pretty well organised, with a mark to show who made the item and when it was tested. It was really then codified about 1478, with details of the items tested and so on and items marked at Goldsmiths Hall in London, hence the term hallmarking. On the screen. This spoon is a nice example of a hallmarked item, the sort of thing you might find at home, not of great value necessarily, but has a story behind it, and it's worth knowing how you follow that up. So let's just see, and these are the marks. You've got the leopard's head, which shows it was tested in London. The lion passant, which is the lion standing on its head at the moment, indicates that it's sterling silver, and therefore 92.5% pure silver. The F shows that it was tested in 1881-82, and Victoria's head confirms that the system has the monarch's approval, but that was only in fact used for 100 years or so. There are other marks which we'll look at in a moment further along the spoon. The quality of the punches that are used to put the hallmarks in are very, very good, and as a result, fake hallmarks are relatively easy to spot. Let's look at some other silver products before delving further into hallmarking itself. I'm using items found around our house to show these marks. This fruit bowl is silver electroplated on copper, and the plating is obviously showing through quite well on the base. If it had been nickel silver as a base, it would be less obvious. And of course, one of the things that becomes apparent is you can't photograph any shiny object without getting the photographer's image on the object. So you get lovely distorted views of the photographer and anybody else in sight. Professionals use a matte spray to dull the reflection of silver when they're going in close for detail. But here you can see the copper showing through very nicely. And there's no attempt to deceive. This is clearly marked as silver on copper. And so moving on to some other things, this coffee pot looks just like silver and polishes up like silver, but it's not. It's most likely what's termed Britannia metal, which is a very fine grade of pewter, compound of tin with various other metals, give a really shiny finish. And if they get it just right, it holds its shine for a long time. And again, of course, you have a reflection nicely in the top of it. The photographer crouching there taking a picture. Nice sauce boats, one of a pair, which shine up nicely, but it clearly states that it's electroplated silver on nickel, although there may be copper underneath the nickel plating. But the base is clearly marked, as you can see here, with EPNS, electroplated nickel silver, various symbols, which, if you have the right books, will actually tell you who made it and the date it was tested or made, and so on. There's lots of stuff to follow up if you've got suitable reference books. This candle holder was more difficult to mark because of the shape of the base. But it's well worth looking at its bottom, regardless of whether you think there might be something there. And here we see, again, it's EPNS, and it's a registered design mark. registration of designs started in the 1840s. They were recorded by the Patent Office. Registration gave protection for a short time, only a matter of years, nothing like a patent, for example. So it could be copied from a few years later. This registration dates from 1906. So those are the sorts of things that are marked up, which are not sterling silver. The assay office was just across the road in Newhall Street from the Museum of Science and Industry, which meant I could easily check details with them. The assay office has now moved to the top end of the jewellery quarter, but they still provide the same service with information if people go along there, check out. But obviously, since I was only across the road, and already to a certain extent in the business, I really thought I'd better try and learn more about hallmarking so that I didn't bother them quite so often. So they moved from this site in 2015. Now, the assaying of gold and silver in Birmingham dates from 1773, when Matthew Bolton and others obtained legislation establishing an assay office in Birmingham. Office records of local makers and the list of dates testing really invaluable if you're a serious collector or serious researcher. I didn't want to spend too much of their time, so I did get to know quite a lot more about the hallmarking system. Birmingham adopted the anchor as their office mark when they stamped items, and Sheffield was approved at the same time for having its own assay office in Sheffield, and they used the crown. Rumour has it that the representatives of the two assay offices, when they went to London to talk to Guildhall about an assay office, about opening assay office in Birmingham, they actually met at the Crown and Anchor Public House, London, and hence chose to use that. You have 4 hallmarks here, very nice clear ones, because of course they're not taken off an object. These are graphics, because the surviving marks on objects can often be damaged or badly polished. Usually the line indicates sterling silver on 3 of these, but one of them, bottom right, has a little picture of Britannia. And that is for the Britannia standard, which was 95.84% silver. But the problem with it, it was in use regularly from 1697 to 1720, but it's really too soft for regular handling. It just polishes away too much. Whereas sterling silver is reasonably robust, and it's usually alloyed with copper. So what we've got here are hallmarks: London, 1796, the leopard's head for the office, date letter, the monarch's head, although even that wasn't used for that long, only for a century or so, and the maker's mark, which is usually initials. Birmingham Assay Office has the anchor, the lion, the date letter for 1824, monarch's head, and Matthew Bolton's mark. Now that's a bit of a puzzle, because this is dated 15 years after Matthew Bolton died. I think that the author of this particular book made a mistake. They'd actually intended to use the earlier date, which we'll come back to again. I suspect the author intended the first letter should be a capital A, as indeed it's shown there, but in a different shaped punch. And the punch shape is critical, knowing which ones you're looking at, what the date is. And I think the intention was to show the date of the assay office being established in Birmingham rather than a later date, and particularly because Matthew Bolton had been so involved. The third one we have here is Chester, with the city arms of three little castles. Lion. For some reason, leopard's head again, and that's date marked for 1797. And the fourth one is Dublin for 1821, with the harp identifying the Dublin office and Britannia mark shown on it. And so on for other offices. But other offices existed for various times, and a decent book of hallmarks will list those offices so that you can get the whole story. It was only in 1860 that somebody thought the public might actually be interested in the date letter sequences. And the full date marks on 21-year cycles normally were finally published with selected makers' marks following research by Octavius Morgan. Can you think of a better name for somebody who was delving into hallmarks? Octavius Morgan. So let's go to that, back to that rather nice silver spoon which I showed you earlier. It had sat on our mantelpiece for donkey's years. I'm not even quite sure where it came from. But it's a nice silver spoon. And of course, curators often consulted about the exhibits or about people's own items which they brought to the museum. Quite often, it takes ages to get around to looking at your own stuff to see if you can date it. And clearly, it's a nice spoon, so I finally got down to open my reference books up and see what I could find. So there it is, and there it is overlaying one of the tables for these sorts for the hallmark date sequence, and really quite informative. One problem with this sort of thing is you get a nice family crest on it. Jolly good luck with that, because the initials of families are very, very difficult to trace. If it's in your family, maybe you can find out. But otherwise, not only is it very difficult to trace, but it actually reduces the value of the silver item if it's got a family crest on it. So let's look at the actual detail and study. And here we have on the back of the spoon, on the handle, very nice set of hallmarks. Turn it up on end, fairly straightforward. We've got the leopard's head crowned because it was tested in London, although of course not necessarily made there. It had been sent into the London testing office to be assessed. The lion passant for sterling silver, the letter date of F, capital and uppercase F. We have to search on a bit for that. And it has Victoria's head, which is a great help in saying at least the date would be during the dates of her reign. But the other thing is to note the shape of the punches and the shield. It's very common for folks to actually claim the earliest use of a particular letter, upper or lower case, and so on. And that, without paying attention to the punch detail, really doesn't mean anything. So let's look at the options for uppercase F. Here we've got 5 of them. So it's important to note the shape of the punch, of that shield. Onto the list we can see that it's 1881-82. We go to the list of 100 hallmarks. There we have it, 1881-82, with an uppercase F in a nice shield of the right shape. So we pinned it down pretty closely. Looking at the maker's mark is a bit more difficult. It's GA in a funny shaped punch. The maker's marks are not limited in the shape of punch they use because you get so many. They tend to use the initials, and you get so many sets of initials, and so they have to use a different shaped punch for each maker. And that sort of detail is really quite critical when you looked at it very closely. And this gives you an idea of some of the different shapes which have been used to enclose the maker's mark, maker's initials. When you look at the books, they're usually in alphabetical order, and as you can see there, we have G in a double, what do you call it? What you see if you look through, well, what you see if the cinema thinks you're looking through binoculars. Not what you actually see, but overlapping discs like that. Normally the lists are in alphabetical order of the first letter, so it makes it rather easier to find. You then go and find maker's mark in the book. Here we have George W. Adams, trading as Shawner and Co. And what's the point? Little description along the end there. Very well known as a maker of silver spoons. So that completes quite a lot of history. If I wanted to follow it further, I could get hold of the London trade directories and see what I could find there about how long George W. Adams had operated there under that particular trade name, and all sorts of other things can be obtained. If there's one or two of the other hallmarks I'll be looking at later, go into those details. That's the way in which a complete hallmark gives so much detail. And we can then go, say, not only to the directories, but to other sources of information. This is a bracelet which was Margaret's, came to her from her mother. Sadly, it was stolen in 1990, but I continue to use it, this family piece, because the image it creates is a good example of the need to be very careful in identification. In the hallmark there, and just one of those coincidences, MG and S were my wife's initials before she chose to become an Andrew rather than a Smithson. Marks are very nice and clear. It's a Birmingham anchor and a letter, capital P. Or is it? Is it uppercase or lowercase? go and look at the here, you can see 1914 is an uppercase, sorry, it's a lowercase p, and 1939 is an uppercase p, but they both look very similar and they're in the same shaped field, even with down to the wiggly bottom. When I compare them very, very closely, you can see that, particularly in the line passant, the bottom of the punch is much more indented. When I look closely at two hallmarks, it looks very much as though it would be 1939, especially there compared with the item itself, just about. 1939 is also much the most likely date for the this particular bracelet, because that's about the time that Margaret's parents married. It would be a wedding present to his wife. Moving to items from the Andrew family, we have my grandmother's dressing table set. That was silver, given by my grandfather, Cecil Andrew, about the time he married Emma Andrew, or became Emma Andrew, in 1906. None of these are particularly valuable, but it's a nice set of family items, probably built up over a period of time. Several purchases to form a near matching set. There are two identical hairbrushes. My grandmother's initial was engraved in the top of both of them. CEA for Emma Andrew. But something odd about the other marks. On the one side, marked sterling silver. But has no legal standing because it's not hallmarked. On the other side, it's marked just about showing through GM, it's an M in the middle there, O 925, and a triangle, the date letter lowercase f. The triangle indicates it's an imported item and it was tested in Birmingham, and that date letter shows it was 1906. GM Co. is listed as Gorham Manufacturing Company, a large American manufacturer of silverware, but they had a factory in Birmingham. So it all gets a bit mysterious as to why it's not properly hallmarked if it was made in Birmingham, but it could well be from American manufacturer. And just to further confuse the whole situation, my grandfather had, for many years before they married, been based in Canada working as a railway engineer on the Canadian Pacific Railway. Then he came back to this country, married my grandmother, so it looks as though he continued to buy items after they were married from that 1906 date. Moving elsewhere in my family, I have a walking stick. My mother's father, James McClarney, worked for the UK Pension Service from it being founded in 1908, initially in his home city of Newcastle on Tyne. He was a well-known member of the Irish community in that city. a little bit more history comes out. That is the silver band on the walking stick. In 1920, he was promoted to senior position in the London office of the pension service and moved south with his wife and my mother, the younger daughter. And this fine stick was presented to him by his friends with this fine silver band and inscribed it there. He must have moved to a fairly senior position in the pension service, but that's rather a nice piece. And he obviously used it. The tip is quite well worn. By this time he was in his late 50s or even into his 60s. During the war, unfortunately, they were bombed out of London after he'd retired, and he, Margaret's mother and Margaret, the youngest daughter, moved back up to Newcastle. His parents had come over from Ireland and settled in Newcastle, and he was one of 9 sons, 2 of whom sadly were killed in the First World War. And I've managed to locate them in the military records. One of them is on the Plugsteer Memorial in Belgium, for those with no known graves. The other is buried in Gallipoli, and quite a problem actually going to Gallipoli just to photograph a single gravestone. So, well-established family. The silver hallmark, shown there, London, 1919, 1920. So it all fits together for the date of his promotion to a job in London. And a rather nice piece to have in the family. I have on occasions used it when I managed to make a mess of my ankle. But that's rather good. I think now we can move back to an item in the museum's collection I came across. Something you might pick up at a car boot sale or even a jumble sale. Particularly if it's dirty, it's not obvious that it's silver. It's rather tarnished, and it's got clearly a fusee case, which is a very short match held in a case which would dangle off a gentleman's watch chain. They were a little bit like storm matches. There's along the underside here, there's a serrated striking channel. But as you can see from it, compared with that 50p piece, the matches themselves are quite short. So once they've struck, you don't want to hang on to them for too long, but they seem to be quite popular. A lot of these turn up. And I should also just mention, in view of the condition, in museums we polish things to put them on display, and they go into a display case and nobody touches them. They do not get polished up so that curators can go and look at them and photograph them for their odd lectures and interests like that. Hence the continuing state of that until it's put on show. Here we see the hallmarks are beautifully protected by the cover on that little match case. So, straightforward, we've got H and A, nice and clear. We've got an anchor mark for Birmingham, and we've got an 8 lying on its side with a horn, and a sterling silver mark. The only answer, if you're faced with a mark like that, when you can't easily decide what it is, what shape letter is it, is to go to the maker's listings books. And here in books and see over this side, 1896 is in fact a W with a horn. So 1896 is the date of this, that this was stamped and tested. H&A, I've found out from the assay office, is for Horton and Allday. There were jewellers at 195 Warstone Lane in the Jewellery Quarter. Trade directories pick up 195 there in the Jewellery Quarter. Sadly, the building has been cleared, and so it's not possible to go and photograph where it was made, although it would be nice if one came across an album of photographs of the Jewellery Quarter to identify it. But that's a bit longer. Other makers yield more information about them in the trade directories. And I'm afraid for this item I haven't got a photograph. Somebody brought in a digital watch, digital pocket watch, into the museum. Could we provide some information? Well, it was hallmarked. It was also marked Hazer's patent, 1885. The assay office could give me the maker as Richard Parsons, on the maker's mark, of Key Hill. He was a gold pen maker who registered his mark in 1855 and continued to use it for years. Going to the trade directories, find him there somewhere. Parsons, retailer, retail brewer. Of Key Hill, 27 Key Hill. That's rather nice. So he wasn't a full-time silversmith. And of course, the trade has tended to have dual occupation amongst a lot of their silversmiths. They couldn't always make enough of an income from silversmithing and that sort of thing, but they had other businesses as well. Here again, somewhere or other, in 1858, and then in 1883, up there somewhere, and even in those days, he was then running a pub, the Brown Lion, yes. Oh, Brown Lion pub. So he'd continued to be in brewing and licensed trade, but also operating up to silversmithing, and kept his registered mark operating for many years. Hallmarking is also used for showing the testing of gold items. Used in much the same way as silver marks, but of course gold has several different standards, and indeed the standards vary quite a lot. Came in just on a bit of a program about identifying some piece of gold on one of the television programs, and it was 15 carat. I don't think it's been used that much. So gold comes in a number of different standards, very much easier to test. Just to mention that silver, by chemical analysis, It's a very laborious process to reduce a piece of silver, so you finish up with a bit of weighable of silver that you can weigh, compared with the weight of the scrapings taken from a silver object. A lot of the time it seems probable that, generally speaking, because the silver is quite soft, it was assessed using touchstone. That's a piece of gritty stone which has been, if you like, calibrated to definitely show, if it gets a mark off the silver, that would show that it's of the right purity. Too big a mark means it's a lower grade of silver. Less of a mark pushes it up a bit. They also use a trolley process called cupellation, which is where they melt the metal and then dissolve the thing in a variety of chemicals and various other ways of trying to precipitate a bit of silver out of it. Sounds awfully laborious, so I think a lot of the time the simple way is to use a touchstone. Hallmarks, at least with the gold, it's much easier to be sure of the standard of the gold you're getting. So let's just have a look at a couple of gold items. This is a pair of pince-nez that are in the museum collection. They quite fiddly. They're in 9-carat gold. And if you're going to be looking at these things, it helps to have very good eyesight. It's marked just on the bar at the top, 9 and 0.375 for 9-carat. And on the other side is triangle for imported into Birmingham, and an L means it was tested in 1910. So there we've got an item brought into Birmingham and tested in 1910. We also say that was some achievement to get a photograph of that. I was using a single-lens reflex camera on a very close-up lens. At one point it became too close up. It knocked the spectacles off the table I was working on, fortunately without breaking them. Because what had happened was, as I was trying to focus this thing, of course the lens came out far enough to knock it over. So there are certain difficulties in getting this, particularly when the, as we'll see a bit later, when the marks are very small, and I have much smaller ones than that to show you. So there we are. This pair of spectacles, imported, tested in Birmingham, 1904. After 1904, because of the import mark, and actually tested from that date letter, 1910. And this list shows the import marks for gold and silver, and you see different shaped shield, whether it's gold or silver, and the different offices, how they marked them. It's quite a comprehensive system that's being used for imported items. And some of those dressing table set items that we have at home, my grandmother, they are also marked as imported, possibly imported from America, given my grandfather's connection with America, Canada. So that's the situation with imported marks. And what are other silver item, again, because they're beasts to photograph, I'm quite proud of. Oh, there's the L for 1910. Margaret and I married in 1967. Here seen obviously at the wedding reception, and you can just see there we have a ring with a nice reasonably clear hallmark showing. Absolute beast to photograph inside the ring. It took an awful lot of messing about, an awful lot of tries to eventually manage to get just one decent photograph of the hallmarking in that wedding ring. Fortunately, rings are usually hallmarked on the inside. If you have a ring altered, for goodness sake, make sure that the bit that's cut out to reduce the size of the ring goes from somewhere else, and not on the section that's hallmarked, or you'll not only destroy historic evidence, but it actually would become unsaleable, because without a proper hallmark you can't sell gold and silver. You can only, not as gold and silver, you can only sell it as silver-coloured metal or gold-coloured metal. Something to bear in mind. This one has a Sheffield hallmark, just visible. 22 carat gold, so it's fairly high quality. The date letter, lowercase f. That's a bit of an interesting point about family history. This was Margaret's grandmother's ring. She died a couple of years before we married, and said that she would like Margaret to have a wedding ring. Not that the old dear was definitely saying it was going to be used in marrying me, but anyway. So the trouble is that when we looked at it, it's not the right date. It doesn't come out. As you can see, we've got three different shapes here, and that's the obvious one. Lowercase f in a rectangle with the corner cut off. Not a shape shield, not a funny f. Now that's not 1829 to 30. We just don't know whether this is a family piece that came down to us, because it's only recently that I looked it up. None of the family that we can quiz about it. And just to confuse the issue, Margaret was adopted, so this would have been a wedding ring in the adopting family rather than her natural family. So the trail goes very quiet. But nonetheless, something a bit interesting. So 1829 to 30. And obviously either passed down in the family or purchased at some point prior to around 1910, when Margaret's grandparents, maternal grandparents, married. Moving back to other things in silver and in our family, silver wedding presents. In this case, it's now, this little frame is now holding a family photograph from 1954. At 11, my age then, I was already taller than my father. I think I was a bit slim in those days, much slimmer than that. So, but there is a nice size of photograph to slot into this silver frame, which was a present from a member of the family for our silver wedding in 1992. And we had several silver presents. Some of them made Birmingham, one in particular, a coaster we're very proud of, that our son bought us. This frame rather nicely fits in as a holding family item. And there is the mark, and it's the S of 1992. That one's marked in Sheffield. Just to confuse the issue, having used the crown for many years, crown as viewed from the side, Sheffield decided to use the crown, but use the crown, but viewed from on top. They do these things to upset you, you know. And that's a nice piece. Again, date stamped to our silver wedding. But the really nice fine present and a really nice family connection is this one. From my uncle and aunt. It's hallmarked London, down to it. Hallmarked 1992 in London. Paper knife. But the really nice point, this was made for us by my aunt. By my Aunt Joan. And you may be able to see J.A. Joan and she was the wife of my uncle, Arthur, who was a senior director of one of the international firms dealing in metalwork and that. He was an accountant and was effectively the chief executive of that company when in his 50s he had a massive heart attack. And the nice piece we know about in the family is not only did Joan look after him so well that he probably lasted nearly 40 years after that dire heart attack, but she went off for something to do for herself because he was not housebound but limited in the amount of he could travel about and so on. She went off and got herself apprenticed in her late 50s to a silversmith. Got to the stage where she was doing pieces either as one-offs for people who would pay or for members of the family. And quite a number of us have nice silver pieces made for us by Aunt Joan. That's nice, and she registered her design mark, and of course it's got the date, 1992, our silver wedding. Final thing I'd like to move on to is something of the sort of thing which you just have to keep an eye open for. More silver things. Or slightly larger ones in the case of these. In the family, 3 napkin rings. These are my father's napkin ring, mine, and another napkin ring wasn't. That was a christening present, so was this. That was a present from my father to my mother when they married in 1942. And so we look at the hallmarks on them. Our father married in, was born in 1918. There is the hallmark, Sheffield mark, and it's 1915, 1916. Quite probably it had sat in a jeweller's waiting for somebody to buy it on my father's christening, 1918. The one in the middle, my christening ring, although I was christened in 1943, but it's dated a Chester hallmark and it's dated 1906. So maybe it's a family piece that's been recycled or maybe even bought at that time. And the third one, mother's one, is hallmark 1942, which was the year that my parents married. Parents only met 3 times during their 18-month engagement because the mother had been moved north with her parents after they were bombed out from London. My father was stuck in a electronics job in the London area, and so it was very difficult for them to get to meet up. So, those were just 3 small items. What I'd like you to try and do is just keep your eyes open. And having kept your eyes open and found something, see what you can find out about it. This is my notebook in which I note down details of patent numbers, hallmarks, registered design numbers, how to work out the day of the week from calendar date of something, and so on. And here are a set of these small books. I've got one with me which I prefer to use. It's the one on the right there. It's a little bit larger illustrations and a little bit clearer on some of the particular marks. And so when I do this talk to antiques, to local groups, and suggest if anybody's interested, if they bring along any small silver items, at least I'll have a look at them. A number of the ones that are presented on those cases turn out to be probably silver from the look, because I've got hallmarks, but they've polished them so assiduously you can't read them anymore. But those books are very useful. There are also rather larger books, coffee table books, which go into even more detail, and in particular that set of Maker's Mark punches it was taken from these books. Nice big illustration. Of course, some of these listings are not perfect. I mentioned that digital watch, and said it was 1885. It's a small L, lowercase l, but it's got a pip on the side. And not all the books show that pip. Quite distinctive. Once you've seen it, remember. So again, I tend to use that as a way of assessing the quality of a pocketbook, maker's detail. If you wander around, as I do from occasions, jumble sales, car boot sales, you just remember a box of tat at home that's come down to you from some reason or other, just have a look. You may have a bit of silver. And maybe, if you've understood a bit about the hallmarking arrangements, you'll be able to tell more about it. And here is a 4-inch long, rather grubby object. This actually came to us in a box of kiddies' toys and other fat from somebody at church when Edward our son was about 4. So he played with the cars, and this sculled around in the bottom of the box for a very long time before I picked it up and thought, oh, what is this? Very grubby, as you can see. But when I slid, you've got you've got a ring here. When I slid it down, it showed silver. It was worth cleaning it up very carefully, able to polish, and it looked rather good. What on earth was it? It's a tube about 4 inches long with this slider that runs up and down, and it's got a hole in it where it could have had a pin running in a slot. And there are rather badly damaged hallmarks on it. You can see the hallmark here, such as I managed to photograph. These are incredibly small. There's that one stamped on that ring, and this one is on the butt end here. That is minute. It shows the quality with which these punches were produced, so it's even legible. So looking at it, I thought, well, the first and most obvious point is the hallmark is much too damaged here to be sure. It looked as though it was Birmingham made, Birmingham tested, with a date letter somewhere in the 1890s. With only half the date letter could be. And there's a lot of distortion from the very, very thin silver being damaged. But sometime in the 1890s, it's a retractable pencil. It's a nub end of penciling with a 4-inch long piece of pencil, and you can pull it back up inside so it can sit in your pocket quite happily without doing any damage, or you can extend it, and it's long enough to use as a pencil. It's missing whatever arrangement there was through the ring to pin the pencil so you can move the pencil in and out. Well, that looked quite good. I'm really quite pleased with that. It's got a reasonable date on it. I know what it is. It's obviously silver. And delving around, as I do from time to time, in books on the shelf, there is a bit out of a 1913 catalogue of Gamages, a London store, showing here silver 5-litre pencil, silver, largest size, 4 3/4, 5 9/9. It's an interesting shape. You'll see outside of this being sheen would be a more interesting shape. So we're talking 1913, it would cost you 5 9/9 for that item. Not easy to equate prices, current prices, but about 5% of a typical wage at the time. So quite an expensive item. So there we are. It's an interesting conversation piece. Pens and the like are something which I've dealt with over the years. So quite fun. So do keep your eyes open. If you come across inscriptions, sometimes they're criminally deceptive, but not that often. Things like EPNS giveaway. Quality items will normally be marked properly because quality item would cost enough to make it worth being honest, not silver, or if it's hallmark. Good. So there we are. That's a little bit about the hallmarking and just one of the Birmingham trades, which is large. The assay office, I think Birmingham is now counted as the largest assay office. Tremendous throughput. And a bit like, in some ways, a bit like the proof house for testing of guns. Very major activity still going on, even though an awful lot of the stuff that they're testing come from elsewhere. Although the Birmingham silver and jewellery trade is still pretty active. So, hope you found that interesting.
Well, it's a splendid run through. If there's any questions, yes, I've got one hand being raised. I'll bring a microphone over to you in a moment. Please get hold of the microphone before you start speaking. Anybody at home watching on broadcast on Zoom, if you've got any questions, can you use the chat function in Zoom? And if we get something interesting, read it out and put it in speaker.
Jim, one or two questions. You didn't mention how they actually tested the item, the chemical.
There's several ways of testing them. I think one of the points about it is that once the the assay office staff have got their eye in, then, as with gold, they could get a fair day down the line with it, looking at the colour. The second thing they could do is to use a touchstone, which is where a piece of stone which is just the right characteristics to leave a little mark on a piece of silver. If it leaves a big mark, that means that it's too soft. And if it's a very too fine a mark, it means it's harder than 92.8%. Other ways of doing it, initially it was what was termed cupellation, which is where they melt it and then dissolve it and mix it with various chemicals and ultimately finish up with an assessment, ideally by removing the other metal with which the silver has been alloyed, copper often, sometimes copper, sometimes nickel silver. Get that out and then finish up with a little bit of metal which you can weigh and compare with the weight of the scraping that you took to start with. I think much more recently various modern ways of doing it have been spectroscopic analysis and so on, which will determine the amount of silver and the purity of it, and the same with gold. Gold is easier because it doesn't alloy with other things, so you don't have to worry about stray bits getting in there. You know what it's alloyed with. So that's it. So I think it does. There's a lot of skill, particularly when the assay office is testing large quantities, large numbers of items, rather than a nice big hoop tureen of this size. They'll pay more attention to getting the sterling silver correct.
The second question, for small items appeared in big volumes, And they test each one, or just test batch?
I think generally speaking, they will test all of them. But it's very difficult to know just what they do get up to. Watch chains, the gentlemen's chunky watch chains for their pocket watches 120 years ago, often every single link will be stamped. And it just seems to me they must have had, not exactly shortcuts, but there were ways of assessing it that didn't involve detailed analysis of each.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Jim. I wondered where the word sterling came from, for sterling silver. Is that? I mean, Stirling's a town in Scotland, but I wouldn't think it's anything connected with.
No idea, really.
You don't know?
No.
And what about the word assay? Where does that? What's that?
No, exactly. We'll try and look it up in the dictionary.
Oh, it's French, is it?
Sorry? No idea. I'm an engineer.
Assay, not essay. The other thing was, I bought the little book of marks. Nothing in that to tell you the later. You can actually find on the internet now. People don't actually want to go and buy a book, buying another book.
Yeah.
Thought it might be interesting.
I imagine these days that there are listings online that you could look at and they'll be bang up to date.
Yeah. Thanks very much anyway.
I've certainly found quite good websites that show the quite clear images and what all the date marks are and things. I found it quite, if I can read the mark at all, then I've quite good. But we've got one over here.
Yeah, so was there any sort of standardization of regards the way the different assay offices operated? And I'm thinking here partly of perhaps a procedure for destroying the dyes every year after they've come to the end of their period of use. So was there any control or regulation of the size of the dyes?
I don't know. My impression is that the dye, I mean, they are beautifully accurately produced, but they're very much tailored to the item that's stamped. On display downstairs, in the case with a lot of silverware on loan from the assay office, there is a very nice piece. It's a paperweight, very chunky, in silver, with a nice image of Queen Elizabeth II. And the way it's displayed, praise be, you can see the bottom edge of this paperweight, and very nice, large, clear hallmarks on it, obviously intended to be viewed properly. That's rather nice. That's 1952 hallmark. Looking around at the silverware we got on display today. Well, you certainly don't want them falling into the wrong hands. I don't know. I've no idea the operation of cells. Oh yes. Oh no, you can, but of course If it's an antique piece, you don't want to lose the antique bit.
Yeah.
And if it is reassessed, then it's reassessed on today's dates. And it's a bit like losing your cherished number plate for your car and having to register with the numbers for today.
Thank you very much.
What have we got
I
here?
don't see the actual questions yet online. One question I've got, Jim, is can you, for the sake of clarification, remind us what sort of alloy nickel silver is? Because, as you say, it's much less noticeable than copper if the silver gets worn off, but it still has a slightly yellowy colour. It's a kind of brass, isn't it, really?
Pass. No
Right.
idea. What interested me was hallmarking. Not all
But
the...
people get confused because it's called nickel silver, and it's actually
yeah.
got no silver in it at all. It's an alloy of copper and
nickel. Yeah.
nickel or something like that.
But, no, these names crop up.
I think that looks as though that's exhausted the questions both here. So I think we should say how interesting that has been. And although, as I said, I had heard a sort of earlier version of it, but I think it's covered a lot more this time.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting subject, albeit rather, rather specialised, and other valuable items, of course, don't get hallmarked. Precious stones and that. Some in the jewellery trade. But anyway, we have heard a lot of interesting stuff there, so let's express our thanks in the usual way.
Good. Well, thank you. Ooh.
Right. First thing I think is to mention what our next meeting will be. Going to have, I'll see if we can get it projected up on the screen. On the 5th of November, I think the soundproofing's here is quite good if there are any fireworks outside. But we're going to have Chris Hodrian giving the second part of his talk on the history of research in British gas. Remember, he gave us a talk in the spring that there was so much to cover and there was so much interesting stuff that, to be honest, he really ran out of time, and so he's offered to come back and give us the effectively part 2, bringing it up to the end of his time there with the technical revolutions that went on in British gas before it was privatised, and the early little bit in the early years of the privatisation era, about the way in which they tried to bring in new ways of producing mostly town gas before the changeover went to natural gas from the North Sea. So that will be here in the Think Tank Theatre, 7 p.m. on 5th Wednesday. I hope to see possible here, and it will be broadcast online much better. People can. Next thing is, I think, to just mention that if you haven't already done so, could you sign the signing in sheet to show who was here, because that's our record. Thank you very much to the technician up there, Liam, who's handled all the audio-visual stuff and made it work. Very appreciative of him, and of Think Tank for letting us use these magnificent facilities. There's a donations box on the table which does help with some of the financial aspects of lectures. haven't got any printed flyers next week, next month, due to, I think, technical problems with my email, and Dr. Andrew to print off. He will probably put some up in the library and places like that. But if anybody wants me to send them a PDF of the flyer, I think Jim and I will be going down to the pub for a drink now. Otherwise, see you in November.